protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadera, Head of State of the Central African Republic. I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Mr. Faustin Archange Touadera, Head of State of the Central African Republic, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, distinguished heads of delegation, ladies and gentlemen. As I take the floor on behalf of the Central African Republic at the 77th session of the United Nations General Assembly, I would first of all like to congratulate Mr. Shaba Koroshi for his brilliant election as president of our session. Your flawless knowledge of the international arena, as well as your substantial personal qualities, are an asset and a guarantee of the success of our work, and undeniably constitute a source of pride for Hungary, your beautiful country. I would also like to commend the excellent work done and the results achieved by Mr. Abdullah Shahid during the 76th session. I reiterate my gratitude to Mr. Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General, for his sustained commitment to international peace and security, and for the United Nations' constant support for my country. Allow me to pay a sincere tribute to Her Majesty Elizabeth II, Queen of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth Realms, a true icon of peace who, during the 7 decades of her reign, was able to maintain excellent relations of friendship and cooperation between the United Kingdom and the countries of the Commonwealth and Africa, and in particular with the Central African Republic. Mr. President, the 77th session of our Assembly, convened around the theme A Watershed Moment, Transformative Solutions to Interlocking Challenges, provides a solemn opportunity to consider the challenges that we share, which are serious causes of concern for the future of humanity. More than ever, the question of security, peace, the environment, and health are entering a phase which is critical. However, the warning signs are being ignored in favor of economic, geopolitical, and geostrategic interests. Mr. President, is not the role of the United Nations to transform the world, to make it more just and more secure, and to ensure the dignity of each and every one of us, regardless of the global context? Because, indeed, the many hotbeds of tension and crisis around the world tug on our collective conscience and also show us that our organization is the product of a bygone era. For that reason, the Central African Republic reiterates its support for the common position of the African Union, which calls for profound reform of the United Nations and the expansion of the seats of members of the Security Council to ensure the more just, more representative participation of all continents. Mr. President, the protection of the environment, that is to say, protecting the place where we live, is one of the interlocking challenges that we must absolutely overcome. it is time for the biggest polluters to honour their commitments, in particular the implementation of the Paris Agreement, as well as international solidarity for climate justice with respect to the most vulnerable populations. Mr. President, COVID-19 has taught us that global public health is an imperative for all nations without exception. My country welcomes the paradigm shift that is taking place in the health sector and the unprecedented momentum of solidarity accompanying that paradigm shift, including access to vaccines for polio, COVID-19, and soon a vaccine for malaria. It's thus with pride that my country achieved the status of a polio-free country and has vaccinated 50% of its national target population against COVID-19. I commend and encourage the Health Emergency Preparedness Initiative implemented by the World Health Organization. The Central African Republic is proud to be the instigator of it and to be the first pilot country which is helping to tangibly improve our ability to manage epidemics. Mr. President, the Central African Republic has seen its march towards development slowed in recent years by serious security and public health crises, which have been exacerbated by a persistent lack of financial support from the international community, leading to the disruption of agriculture, forestry and mining outputs. As a fragile state facing food insecurity and a glaring shortage of material and human resources, the Central African Republic continues to make enormous sacrifices to improve its macroeconomic management and its fiscal governance. With the support of its partners, my country has been able to implement ambitious reforms to strengthen the mobilization of revenues and optimize public spending. My country expects the re-establishment of the extended credit facility, which was suspended by the International Monetary Fund, in order to help boost domestic resources, to address the lack of budgetary support from technical and financial partners, and the digitalization of small tax revenue collection. Areas of solutions still need to be explored through regional and international mechanisms in a spirit of interdependence in order to overcome the following challenges: developing physical infrastructure, transport, energy, water, education and health through the implementation of adapted programs and the mobilization of financing through public-private partnerships. The challenge of access to capital markets for the financing of development projects through public-private partnerships. The development and coordination of trade policies and economic relations with other regions. The challenge of supporting the education system through the training of trainers and the creation of professional training centres. The development of a resilient economy that is able to resist internal and external shocks by diversifying the economy and using new technologies. The challenge of developing innovative financing mechanisms, targeting both agriculture and the climate in order to improve access to the necessary financial capital to develop the agro-pastoral sector, and the challenge of promoting smart solutions and approaches to climate change, which are adapted to the national context. Mr. President, The Central African Republic was the first country in Africa to adopt Bitcoin as a reference currency and digital payment system, and the first country in the world to unanimously adopt a law regulating cryptocurrencies. This ambitious and innovative initiative represents an enormous opportunity to reposition the economy, to improve prospects, and to change the destiny of the people of the Central African Republic at this time when we need to open up to new horizons and solutions that go beyond what is conventional. Mr. President, it is an established fact that the Central African Republic is contributing to finding transformative solutions to interlocking challenges with more engagement and conviction. In this respect, several bold reforms and initiatives have been undertaken with the support of international partners in order to strengthen the rule of law and restore the authority of the state across the country's territory. What's more, the courageous measures taken by the government to combat impunity, the implementation of the political agreement for peace and reconciliation of the 6th of February 2019, and the Luanda Joint Roadmap, as well as the recommendations from the Republican Dialogue, have helped reduce tensions and build confidence in the national socio-political climate. The Central African Republic is faithful to its international commitments and abolished the death penalty on the 1st of June 2022. On the 31st of August, it adopted a law on countering the trafficking of persons and a child protection code. Mr. President, it is with particular interest that I took note of the firm condemnation by the Security Council in its resolution 2648/2022 of the 29th of July 2022 of attacks perpetrated against peaceful civilian populations by armed groups. I also note with satisfaction the Council's position against transnational trafficking networks, which continue to supply armed groups with weapons of all sorts. I welcome the significant progress which allowed for a substantial lifting of the arms embargo imposed on our defence and security forces, and I would like to pass on the gratitude of the people of the Central African Republic to all friendly and fraternal countries which firmly support our request for a complete and total lifting of the embargo. I do, however, deplore the manoeuvring which aims to legitimize armed groups and insidiously to maintain the embargo. Who stands to benefit from this crime? Mr. President, the Central African Republic has suffered a great deal from miscalculations and disinformation, something which has gone on for, unfortunately, far too long. The young people of the Central African Republic are an elite in waiting. They need only peace and security to develop their country. I wish to denounce the disinformation and manipulation campaigns which aim to discredit and then to forcibly destabilize the democratic institutions of the Central African Republic. These campaigns, conducted by certain international media outlets against a backdrop of vague and threatening neocolonialism, the success of which is due less to their truthfulness and more to their tried and tested rhetoric, are motivated solely by the desire to preserve the geostrategic and geopolitical interests of some states far from the vital interests of the Central African Republic's people. The Central African Republic calls for a relationship of trust and mutual respect with its partners. We are always ready to cooperate with every country in the world, provided that its vital interests and our sovereignty are respected. I therefore wish us every success in our work. Long live international solidarity. Thank you.
En nombre de la Asamblea.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Head of State of the Central African Republic for the statement just made, and I request Protocol